pase, pierna derecha, directo al arco, ¡golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for November 30th, 2017 for the second straight season in a row. MLS Cup will be played north of the border. Toronto FC will host for the second consecutive year the MLS Cup, and for the second consecutive year, they will be in the MLS Cup. To talk about Toronto FC's match from last night against Columbus, we have on the line with Rudi Schuller. Rudi, good morning.
Good morning, guys. How you guys doing?
Doing well, Rudi. Obviously, last night was a stressful night, but one that worked out in the end. Having been there last year during that insane Montreal series, and then again last night, you were down in the field there at the final whistle. Can you sort of compare what the club's reaction was? Was it similar? Do you think that they were more relieved this time? Just compare the two championships.
Yeah, it was different. I mean, obviously the series were much different. There was only one goal scored in this series against Columbus versus how many? I don't even remember how many goals last year. 12?
Like 12 or 13? 13?
Yeah. 12 between the two, between Toronto and Montreal last year, something like that. It was just ridiculous, right? So obviously that the roller coaster that was last year's Eastern Conference Championship wasn't there. It just wasn't there. So as Duane, as you said before, it was nervy, but I think it was nervy on both sides. Because a goal for either team kind of seals it, right? At 1-0 after Josie Altidore scored that goal, Columbus could still have stolen that series with just one kick of the ball, and they very nearly did at the end. And on the flip side, TFC could have sealed it with another goal and put it out of doubt. But instead, we had those 4 minutes of extra time, or added time rather, that I think made everyone on pins and needles on both sides. So. The reaction from the club was kind of commensurate with that. It was kind of, they expected to be where they are now. They expected to be hosting MLS Cup. That's been their stated goal the whole year. They expected to win everything they have in front of them. They've done that so far. They've got one more to go. But I think those expectations also weighed on them a little bit because it wasn't their own expectations. It was the expectations of the city, of the crowd, of the league, really, because this is a team that showed last year and on all of this year that they are the best in MLS and they are the favorites. So because of those expectations, I think that it was I think the reaction after the game was one much more of relief than it was of the unbridled joy that we saw last year. Last year they were spraying beer on each other, they were doing all crazy stuff in the locker room. This year they were celebrating. I was on the field level, as you mentioned. They were celebrating, and they were celebrating heavily. But I think it was much more of a relief. And okay, we finally got back to the stage that we had worked to all year. Now it's time to do the next thing. But it was. I think it was a reaction that was much more in line with their own expectations. In that yes, they're happy to be there, but they fully expected to be there. So it's one of those things where it's just a big weight off their chest, but they still have to do the next stage.
Fair enough. I rewatched the game this morning because I'm a soccer that way, and I actually found that the TFC, they were more dominant than my memory played in the night. Obviously, Columbus had two really big chances that they probably could have scored on at least one of them. That Bradley tackle is going to go down in the ages if they go on to win MLS Cup. From your perspective, how close was this game? Was it deserving victors in the end?
I'd say it was close, and TFC were deserving victors. Like I said, it was the margins for error were almost nil, if not. Well, they were nil. I mean, like I said, one kick of the ball and Columbus is through. That being said, I actually tweeted at halftime of the game last night that TFC had 60% of the possession in the first half, but it really did not feel like it. It felt like Columbus were very comfortable in their lack of possession, and whenever they had the ball, they were a little bit more purposeful in TFC's half than TFC were in Columbus's half, in the first half at least anyway. In the second half, I think TFC, they made some adjustments. They brought some other players on, and they looked a little bit more like the team that they should have been. So it was very even. Columbus was a worthy opponent. I think I honestly feel this is the best team that TFC's played against over the last two playoffs. To be quite honest, just over the two legs, they were that good. They were good defensively. The only thing they didn't have was goals, and that obviously it's a cliche, but that's what wins games. And unfortunately for them, they just didn't have it. But it's one of those things where I think it was a lot closer than people realize. But TFC, I'm kind of on both sides of the fence on this. I think that both teams were comfortable at certain stages, but either team could have walked away with the victory in that game.
All right, but before I pass off to Kevin, I got an early weather update for December 9th. High of 0, feels like -6.
That's a lot warmer than last year.
Yeah, get this, guys, though. 40% chance of, drum roll, please, snow.
Woohoo! Well, orange ball.
Yeah, orange ball. And, first of all, the game's being played at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's a lot better than what it was last year. Well, knowing with TV, it'll probably kick off at 5 o'clock. But still, that's much better than what it was. It kicked off at around 9 p.m. last year. So that should be good. At least there'll be some daylight left. And if recent history is any indication, Toronto teams win in the snow. They win championships in the snow. So, hey, bring it on, right? I want to see a wild and crazy MLS Cup final because last year wasn't that.
Yesterday on the show, Rudy, I mentioned that Jozy Altidore, when he comes back from either a layoff, an injury, a long time of not playing, usually he comes back and he scores. Well, it happened again last night. Were you impressed but not about the goal itself? Because the goal was nice. It was a nice goal, but it's the circumstances heading into the goal where he hurts his ankle, he's out, he can't play, he's on the sideline, he's getting wrapped and froze his foot, comes back on, can't really run, but goes for it once, scores, and then gets subbed off. How impressed were you?
Field, yeah, that's kind of, it's again, I'm going to lean on a cliche, but that's kind of the stuff that legends are made of. The whole situation. Yeah, yes, Altidore is actually the leading scorer for TFC in the playoffs, over the past 2 seasons, which means he's the leading scorer over the entire franchise history. He shows up in the playoffs, but last night was different because, like you said, he was clearly hobbling out there. I tweeted that he was done. His night was done. I could just see him sitting on the ground and grabbing his ankle and trying to walk it off, and it just didn't happen. And he went off the field, and he came back on the field, and he went off the field. I thought he was done. Armando Cooper was ready to come on. He was standing right by the fourth official's desk, waiting to come on, but he was being held off by Greg Vanney because they were working on him on Altidore. And Altidore comes back in. He takes a little jog, and then all of a sudden, it's that little triangle between him, Javinko, and Vasquez. Boom, boom, boom in the net. And it's unbelievable. And in a town like Toronto that loves their blue collar kind of, that cliche blue collar will throw your heart on the line and all that kind of thing. To be able to score a goal of that magnitude with that kind of injury, like I said, that's kind of the stuff that legends are made of. And it's kind of funny because the two guys who made legendary plays in that game were the two guys that are being booed mercilessly for not having heart in the U.S., in their home country. Yet, TFC fans see it the polar opposite. They see that those two guys will do whatever it takes to win. And that's literally what Michael Bradley said last night, too. He's like, we will do whatever it takes to win. He was talking about the entire team.
Yeah.
But those two guys specifically, in the shadow of their World Cup qualifying failure and, all the stuff that's followed since then, the fact that those two guys are the guys that stepped up the most last night just kind of says a lot about them.
Maybe there's another problem with the U.S. men's national team. Maybe there's that, too.
Yeah, exactly. And the way Michael Bradley's being used and the way that Jozy Altidore was being used in those final 2 games, he played way too much by Bruce Arena in 2 very hot environments. We don't have to talk about that too much, but yeah, my opinion is that those guys, when used properly, we see what they are, and we saw it again last night.
One statistic that after yesterday will surprise a lot of people: Alex Bono is second in TFC history for the amount of wins. A lot higher than Clint Irwin already. A lot higher than Kojic. A lot higher than Joe Bendik. And he's now only behind Stefan Fry for the amount of wins. Alex Bono's what, 24? 25?
Something like that, yeah.
How impressive have you been? That another great game by Alex Bono, another clean sheet yesterday. I am impressed. Color me impressed. I was not necessarily a biggest fan of Bono, and when they drafted him, and then they waited a little bit, and Duane and I had a lot of conversation about him, and we were like, "Oh, Q Roberts is in front of him." Well, who is Q Roberts? Whatever happened to him?
Yeah,
And Alex
unfortunately
Bono.
for him, yeah.
No, exactly. Are you impressed by Bono? Is it surprising that he's second all time already for wins? And what's his ceiling?
Well, I'm not surprised that he's second all time for wins because
It's not a
TFC
lot.
didn't win a lot before before 3 years ago. It's it's a joke, but it's the truth. Obviously this year was ridiculous in the fact that they got 20 wins in a single season, and we all know that the records that were set, and he was a starter for that, so that helps him a lot right there. And he also played a lot last year when Irwin went down with a couple of injuries. So the fact that he's the starting keeper for the team when they're at their best, I mean, that kind of lends itself to being, the most wins. Stefan Fry is at the top there just because he was around so long. He wasn't getting a lot of wins per year, and that's not on him. We know what a great goalkeeper he is. We saw that in the MLS Cup last year, and how he's been playing this year for Seattle. But for Fry, it was just an issue of the amount of time put in. With Bono, he's playing behind a very good team, and that's not to take away from Bono himself, because when called upon, he's been spectacular this year. The brain farts have gone down, which is, it's to be expected from a young keeper. He's become a lot more commanding in his box. The team is trusting him a lot more with the ball at his feet now, I've noticed, which is, I don't know if they should be doing it that much yet, but they are. They're passing it back to him a lot more. They're allowing him to distribute the ball. He's become a leader back there. Before the second half of this year, even like when he played last year, he was relying a lot on Drew Moore to kind of take charge back there and be the leader. Drew Moore's still that guy, but now Bono's showing his voice as well. I honestly think that last night's game with the two goalkeepers that were in there, Zach Steffen for Columbus and Alex Bono for TFC, that's the future of the U.S. men's national team goalkeepers right there. I think that's 1 and 2 in 2022, to be quite honest. There are a lot of good goalkeeping prospects coming up for the U.S., but I think those two guys are the top ones right now. Bill Hamid, of course, is up there too, but we'll see what he does in Norway now. I believe it's Norway. But those two guys, to me, it's a little bit of recency bias, of course, but those two guys to me have shown that they definitely deserve to be in that pool, and at least be in the top 3 or 4 candidates to take over the starting job.
Last night in the post-game press conference, Josie Altidore basically flat out said that he was playing in the MLS Cup come hell or high water. They weren't taking that game away from him. What's your take on the level of his injury? We all know that Javinko wasn't 100% last year in MLS Cup final. Josie won't be 100%, but will he have enough percentage there to be the game breaker that he's capable of?
Yeah, we don't know. It's too early. It's too early to say. Obviously, they're going to be doing everything they can to get him ready. It didn't look good, and MLS Cup is only 10 days away now. So ankle injuries can be tricky. It depends. If it's just a slight sprain, you can come back in a week. If it's a high sprain, that's a month to 6 week kind of thing. So it's one of those things where we don't know the extent of it until he goes and gets scans today and starts running on it at the training ground and seeing where it is. He's not the type of guy who will put his team in jeopardy just for his own personal glory. That was emotion talking last night. He wants to be on the field because he's a competitor, and we saw that. We saw how he gutted it out so he could score that goal. That was his emotion talking. I think that if he's not ready to start, then he won't start. He's not going to be a demand. He's not going to he's not going to cause a hissy fit if Vanny says, look, we need you to sit on the bench or possibly not even play because you're not going to help us out here. But I do think that if there's any kind of like 50% or even 40% chance of him at least being on the bench, then he'll be on the bench. But it's too early to say whether he'll be on the field at kickoff. But I believe him when he says he's going to be there. He's the kind of guy that will absolutely want to be there, especially because I think that he was robbed of his MLS Cup moment last year by the aforementioned Stefan Fry, and I think he wants to do that again. He's shown that he's the man in the playoffs for TFC over the past 2 seasons, and he wants to continue that. And it's kind of speaking to the overarching storyline that they've been pushing, that it's all about MLS Cup this year. Well, that's his personal kind of take on that. Is that it's all about MLS Cup for the team, and he wants to be the guy to lead it. But if things are not well enough for him to start, he won't. I don't think he's going to cause any trouble or anything like that.
Any chance it's not a rematch?
Maybe like that meme on the internet where it's like, you're telling me there's a chance? There's that kind of chance. So
You're saying there's a chance?
Yeah, exactly. Find that Jim Carrey GIF or whatever, however you say it, and that's the chance. So 1% chance that it's not a rematch.
Mary Samsonite. Rudi.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's her name. In Aspen, in Colorado. But that's a terrible movie. We should not do movie reviews here because I would talk about Die Hard probably once a week, and well, it's Die Hard time right now.
Time of year.
Yeah, it's the best Christmas movie ever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of John McClane, last night, one thing we saw that we thought was maybe going to be the celebratory moment, the yippee-ki-yay moment, when Vasquez stepped up to the spot. Terrible penalty. Nice save by Zach Steffen. What's with Toronto FC and penalties?
That's a very, very good question. And Vasquez, that was the first penalty he missed this year. He was 3 for 3 in the regular season. I think he also took one in the Canadian Championship. Maybe I'm misremembering, but he also made one against Zach Steffen in the last that 5-0 destruction that they had the last time those two teams played against each other in the regular season. So he was kind of money going into that, and Greg Vanney was asked about that after the game. Like, how come Vasquez was the guy who took it, not Giovinco or Altidore? Well, Giovinco's had his struggles too. He missed the last 2, and Altidore's missed 1 or 2 this year as well. So Vasquez was the guy on the run, on the perfect run of form, and he's the guy who most recently scored on Zach Steffen in the penalties. So it just seemed like it made the most sense. So Vanney said that the players sorted out on the field. It's usually up to those 3 guys. It's not going to be someone like, I don't know. It's not going to be Eric Zavaleta stepping up. It's going to be obviously it's going to be one of the guys that you expect to step up, and they're all veterans, so they kind of step it up, and they kind of work it out on the field. And I saw that happening because Josie Altidore is the one who grabbed the ball after the foul was made, and then he actually handed it to Victor Vasquez and kind of gave him a high five and said, "Go do this." So obviously the players are okay with Vasquez stepping up, and I'm okay with it too because generally he's money from there. But yeah, I don't know if it's maybe BMO Field is on an Indian burial ground or something, but the penalties, I don't know.
There's a slight angle on the pitch. Then when the players hit it just goes on. Always right.
It makes no sense because you got Altidore and Giovinco who scores better from 25 yards out with a wall in front of him than he does from the penalty spot this year, and Altidore who's has just been an absolute beast all year long. And was also on a good run until he missed a couple in a row as well. So it's one of those things where these guys are from the run of play and from much longer distances, they're so much better. But when they're just one-on-one with the keeper, and I don't know, maybe I can't really say it's nerves because those guys, they don't show that kind of emotion.
Yeah,
they don't show that kind of nerviness on the field. It's just something they have to work out because especially they're probably going to be rematched against Seattle, and they're probably going to play the same kind of game Seattle is rather. So penalties are definitely a thing. And if it comes down to that, there's going to be a lot of PTSD in the stands. And the last thing they want is the players to have that as well. So I think they're going to be working on penalties a lot in this next 10 days.
Rudi, I want to wish you a great 10 days ahead. You're going to be busy. And I want to wish you a great 10 months ahead too. Because a few weeks ago, Argos won the Grey Cup. That's American football. The football that you don't touch with your foot. The MLS, Toronto's going to the MLS Cup. The Leafs are going to go to the Stanley Cup Final. Toronto's going to win everything, but then they'll never win anything again. Would you take it? Would you take it?
Toronto, yeah.
Would you take it, though? If you win everything this year, then you for sure will never win anything again. Do you take winning everything this year?
Well, I mean, wow. Yeah, that's a tough question. I feel like the Argos are due every few years just because the league is so small. So I can't count them out winning again in 10 years or something like that. But for the rest of the teams, yeah, I feel like any Torontonian will have to take it just because of history and the fact that it's really tough to win in leagues that have 20 to 30 some odd teams. By law of averages, a team is only supposed to win once every 30 years. Now, of course, Toronto has decided to buck those averages and make it even worse. But I'm very surprised that you're saying that the Leafs are going to go to the Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, that's a hot take right there. I wasn't expecting it. But yeah, if you were to put it to me right now, I'd say for the city, yeah, take it. Why not? Make it. Just have everything at once and have one big party and burn the whole place down to the ground.
Before I let you go, Rudy, I was going to say that you take that bet because the city would burn down the day the Leafs won the cup.
Yeah, CN Tower's falling over at that point.
It'll be the leading CN Tower. All right, Rudi Schuller of the Sporting News, thank you very much for your time today. I'm sure we'll have time to talk about MLS Cup in the next few weeks.
Yeah, of course, man. Anytime, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
Joining us, just arriving home from Toronto, in Columbus, Patrick Murphy of The Massive Report. Patrick, I'm sorry.
What's going on, guys?
Not much, Patrick. Yeah, tough loss, obviously. The underdogs going into the game, they had their chances. How much is Kamara kicking himself today?
I think Kamara's kicking himself for not kicking properly. Justin Merrim's kicking himself. Adam John maybe is headbutting himself. I think there's a lot for the Columbus Crew players to look back on the game last night and say, we could have walked out of there with a win or a tie. Either one would have gotten us through, and they weren't able to do it ultimately. Being in the locker room after the game, there was a lot of emotion, a lot of I would say not regret. I think they're proud of what they accomplished this year, but just knowing that they believed this could have gone further, this should have gone further, and they weren't able to handle the job when they had those opportunities we just talked about.
Yeah, I think, for the record, those were the best two teams in Major League Soccer playing last night. We'll see how that plays out in the final, with all due respect to likely the Sounders, but certainly the Crew, the way they played down the stretch and in the playoffs, very worthy competitors to that. How do you build on this for what might be a strange season in Columbus next year? Do they add? What do you think that they have to do to take that next step?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting. I was talking with some of the guys on our staff about, how we're going to handle some off-season coverage, and we're talking about, previewing what this team needs and whatnot. And it's kind of like, how do you handle it, knowing that an announcement might be coming saying that this team's going to move, yet you're still trying to build, around a successful core, a team that, this year was in the Eastern Conference Final. 3 years ago, I guess now, 2015 was in the final, the MLS Cup final, with a lot of the same pieces. So they know they've got a pretty good team here, but you've got to convince guys to, come join this team that there's uncertainty with, that there, could be hey, we're going to be in this one city for 1 year, and then we're going to be in another city starting after that. And, already if you're talking to guys over in Europe or guys in South America that aren't familiar with the States, you're trying to sell them on cities they haven't heard of, like Columbus, and I assume Austin, although it's a city in Texas, is probably not as familiar. So it'll be interesting to see. I do think that they can build on this success. I think you want to get a little bit more depth at the striker position. While Adam John came on and had his chances last night, I think you want to have a better option. You look at Toronto, for example. When Josie Altidore has to come off, I assumed Ricketts would be the guy to come on. It was Armando Cooper. So obviously there's some depth there, and they can move people around and still be able to be dangerous offensively. I think this team can always get better defensively. Center back, I think, while they have been good recently, Jonathan Mensah's had his moments. I assume he'll be back. He's a designated player, but Josh Williams, you guys are familiar with, played very well down the stretch. Could they upgrade that position and get another, higher caliber center back in there and have Josh be kind of that utility guy in the back? I think so. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Artur, who we didn't see last night, Brazilian on loan. There's a lot of talk coming out of Brazil about Sao Paulo wanting him back. And the Crew do have an ability to buy him. It's just where that number stands. So, that's going to be a big priority for them, is getting him back, because I do think they're a better team, although Mohamed Abu played probably his best game all season last night. So they do have some depth there, but I think they certainly want Archer back. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting offseason. I think off seasons in general are interesting, especially when you're building on some success but not complete success. And we'll obviously be watching closely to see where they go from here.
Pepe Higuain signed a new contract last offseason, but the way things are moving, I wouldn't be surprised if, like you mentioned, the core of Columbus changes a little bit. Just because of the uncertainty with the future of the club past 2018 season, it'll be a little difficult, like you mentioned, to convince either free agent, players from abroad, to come in and dedicate themselves to your project. Do you see Columbus maybe lowering the expense in 2018, depending on what is going to happen in 2019?
I don't think from the soccer side of things they're going to view it that way. I think Greg Berhalter is going to go out and treat it like every other offseason. But I do think that is certainly looming, and that's not something that you can avoid. There's speculation about some of these players that have been in this club for years, like Justin Merrim, some of the guys that are more local, like Will Trapp, who grew up in Columbus, Josh Williams, who is an Ohio guy, what their thoughts are on the whole Austin move, behind the scenes. And obviously when they've talked to us, it's been all about on the field, we're focused on this playoff run and whatnot. But, are these guys that are going to want to make the move to Austin, given their connections to Columbus and the state of Ohio? And I think, maybe you can loop Higuain in on that. He's a professional. He's moved around quite a bit throughout his career, including different countries, but he's also made Columbus his home. His family, his kids have kind of grown up here over these past several years. I know he talked about when he signed that new contract, his connections to the fan base and how much that meant to him and whatnot. So does a move to Austin potentially change his plans? I don't think he's going to retire now. I was talking to one of the other writers here locally the other night about, if they were to go on and win MLS Cup, maybe would he consider then retiring, just so he doesn't have to be a part of kind of what could potentially be a lame duck year here in Columbus. So I do think that is the most interesting part about guys maybe going elsewhere, if they think they can avoid being part of a confusing year. But in terms of bringing guys in, I think, I don't know how many guys abroad really know the situation here. I think obviously Greg Berhalter and the staff and recruiting guys will have to alert them of that. But, I think professional players are used to moving for the most part. And so I don't know if it will impact things too much. But as for the core, there could certainly be some changes. I think they want to try and keep that together. But like I said, we don't know what these guys are thinking behind the scenes with their families and whatnot. Maybe a player like Will Trapp, has an opportunity abroad that he wouldn't have considered before, but now would consider more seriously, or something like that. And this is just entire speculation on my part, but it is something that I think we'll have to wait and see how it plays out in the offseason.
When we're looking at the 2016 season, there was a lot of animosity on the field, especially between Pipa and Kai Kamara at that point. And it was a difficult result in 2016. 2017, you made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Yes, it was difficult off the field. It was difficult off the pitch with the rumors and the pre-court sport ventures, and Italy pre-court wanted to move to Austin. What is the feeling in the supporters right now after the defeat in the Eastern Conference Final? Do you still have that little hype and the happiness of, we played great this year and just let's remember this going forward? Or is everything else that's happening taking over what a supporter's thinking about?
I think it's a mixed bag right now, and I think it almost depends who you talk to. I talked to some people when I got back last night that were at the airport that we're happy that the team made it as far as they did. You mentioned the 2016 year, coming off that and, turning it around as successfully as they did. But I think there's other fans who are disappointed and realize that this team was that close to doing, something even more special. And then there's the kind of Save the Crew contingent, which still, overlap into the either disappointment or proud of the team, and maybe both, that are, as focused on the field stuff as the off the field stuff. The guys that have kind of led that movement want to make sure, and I think we talked about this when I was on with you guys last week, that this doesn't go by the wayside now that the team won't be be in front of the national, media each week with being out of the playoffs. So, I think that there's a lot of different kind of thoughts going on in the fan base. The Save the Crew people have been very vocal about, making sure that this doesn't die with the end of the season. And so, it'll be interesting to see how they go about that, how they keep themselves in the front of people's minds, especially locally. But I think that there are some people that are disappointed that it didn't go further, and not disappointed in effort or anything like that, but just with how close things were. Obviously, Toronto is a very good team, and, they saw them go head to head with that team. So, it's going to be a lot of looking back and thinking what could have been, I think, both on the field with the players and then from the fan base as well.
Yeah, I was going to sort of go in the similar direction you were speaking there, so maybe I'll get you to expand on that a bit. Like, how do the supporters go about trying to keep that momentum going? Out of sight, out of mind, right? And with the season over, obviously MLS Cup would have been a great opportunity to continue the Save the Crew movement, and it would have been hilarious at the stadium. But nonetheless, sadly for you, we don't get to see that. But how do you continue that momentum in your mind?
I think they've really jumped on the social media thing, and this day and age that plays a big part. So I think that'll be big. Locally at least, they can continue to have, meetings, rallies, stuff like that. Morgan Hughes, who has become a little bit of the fan face of things, has started putting out these YouTube videos updating people on what's going on, what they've been doing, and kind of what people can do to help. The nice thing about it from the Save the Crew perspective is that the mayor's gotten involved and local businesses and whatnot. So, I will say that they've made bumper stickers and regular stickers and stuff, and you're starting to see those kind of pop up all over town. So at least locally, the message is still there. Now nationally is a whole different animal. I know that, I don't imagine that during, the broadcast of MLS Cup, they're going to be talking about Save the Crew, given that the team's not in it. I know that people involved in Save the Crew continue to reach out, especially to former players that are still in the national spotlight, guys like Kyle Martino, Alejandro Moreno, that, have connections to this, to try and get them to continue to talk. My colleague Andrew Erickson, who writes for the Columbus Dispatch, was talking to Taylor Twellman in an interview before the game, and Twellman was talking about how special Mafre Stadium is to him and whatnot. So I think trying to get those guys to still sympathize, maybe is the word, with the situation. If they're tweeting about it, if they're retweeting things, if you can keep them kind of addressing the situation here, at least then people aren't forgetting that it's out there. So, I don't know exactly what the Save the Crew people have planned, but, they've so far been a thorn in the move to Austin side, way more than I think anyone expected. And they've been very well organized, and I don't expect that to change, even though the team's not playing.
Well, you mentioned the Save the Crew initiative and everything. For listeners that are listening to this outside of Columbus, what can they do? Mm-hmm. They can use the hashtag Save the Crew, Crew96, but we're talking about concretely, like, what can they do to make sure that the crew still exists, or what can they do to help save the crew?
Yeah, there is a Save the Crew website that went up rather quickly and is really well done. Congrats to whoever put that together. But and there's a lot of things on there that you can do. There's emails that you can send in terms of templates and that are already designed for you, things like that. I know that they've encouraged fans from other teams to get in contact with their organization and, try and help, put an end to this from an MLS perspective. I think, the thought there is that if other fans from other cities are letting their owners know, hey, we don't want to see this happen, whether it's because we sympathize with Columbus or whether it's because, we realize that, and maybe this isn't the case, the Toronto fan base, but some other fan bases that are in similar situations where the attendance numbers and whatnot aren't great. Hey, if this happens in Columbus, this could happen in Colorado. This could happen in New England. Obviously, the ownership is different in those situations, but I'm just using them as an example. So, there's plenty on the website, and I haven't dived into all of it, but SaveTheCrew.com would be a place to start. Morgan Hughes, who is on Twitter, has been the, like I said, kind of the ringleader. So getting in contact with him, he's very open and willing to talk to people about what they can do, and a super nice guy. So those would be the two places I would start if people are interested. And obviously, I think everyone here in Columbus would appreciate any help. There's been banners at stadiums all across the playoffs, and the guys are working tirelessly to continue to make those. So if the fine folks in Toronto want to have some Save the Crew banners at BMO Field, next week at MLS Cup, I'm sure they would send some up your guys' way.
Or like a big Thrillium, like just put a big Thrillium in the stand or something.
There you go.
Patrick Murphy of the Massive Report, thank you very much for your time over the last few weeks. Due to Columbus's run, we had you on the show a few times, and it was a pleasure. Can't wait to talk to you next year about Columbus. You can follow Pat on Twitter at _Pat_Murphy. Thanks for your time, Pat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on these last 2 weeks.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back, Duane, just to wrap things up today. I know it was an emotional night last night for you and your company. How was that terrible drum beat by Vanni? Like, come on, the guy needs rhythm. The guy needs some classes or something.
Yeah, he kind of messed up the clap at the end there a little bit, but I think we'll forgive him for that. Rudi said it, I think, best, that it was more relief than exhilaration, unlike the Montreal game, which was just pure emotion at the end. And that had to do with the rivalry and just the nature of that game and those two late goals. But
Toronto was playing well last year. That's the difference, I think. Last year, like Montreal and Toronto, both teams were playing well, and it was a result coming at the end because, Toronto was better. This time around, I can't say Toronto played well. I can say that they played well enough that they survived. They hadn't scored 242 minutes or something, heading into the goal, the out-the-door goal last night. So they didn't play well, but they still made it there. So I think that explains the relief sentiment.
Yeah, and look, I'm of two minds of that. The fact that they gutted it out and got back-to-back clean sheets, I don't think we should discount that. But the fact that they gutted it out makes me think, maybe they can find a way to win a title game. But on the same hand, it would be a lot nicer if they just would, find that August form again, right? Because that would be fun in the MLS Cup final to roll 4 or 5 on the opponent. But at this point in time, I think it is going to be what it is. It was funny at the end, like I said. Last year was just pure it was just unexpected, kind of. They came on the roll late. They weren't dominating all year in the same way they were this year. And I was talking to people, in the lead up to the game, saying that I can emotionally, if I want to talk about a pure fan here perspective, emotionally I can deal with the idea of losing the final. I can, because it's a one game and anything can happen. Maybe it goes to kicks again or whatever. That would suck, but you can kind of deal with that. But had they lost last night, it would have seemed like the season was really wasted. At least they're going to play the championship game. At least we get a second chance to play that game in front of ourselves again. And we have that hope of having the end of the game go a little bit better this time. And, back-to-back clean sheets, as I said, that's what they'll probably be focusing on in the dressing room. That's what they'll try and say, that if we can keep another clean sheet, we'll probably find a goal this year. You would think. It's unlikely that that they'll go another 90 without.
You would think, but I wouldn't be surprised because
pretty damn good defensively too.
Yeah,
and look,
exactly.
I don't want to discount Houston, the possibility of Houston winning, but that's face facts here. It's highly unlikely that it's going to be anything other than Seattle, Houston in the final.
If I'm Toronto, I'm kind of rooting for Houston tonight because it's going to be cold. And if there's one thing Houston players are not necessarily used to, is the cold. It's traveling
no doubt.
and the cold. So,
like TFC itself's not going to say this, but if you're a supporter, yeah, feel free. You want Houston.
Sure, Houston. Like Houston score 3 tonight, then move on. But it's going to be difficult. But let's finish with this. If you missed yesterday's show and you want to hear more about the Houston side of things, you can listen to yesterday's show with Glenn Davis of Soccer Matters on ESPN 97.5 in Houston to get all the information you need heading into tonight. But Seattle or Houston, that is the question.
Yeah, fair enough. We should really quickly mention that Five Rings will normally be on Thursdays, but it will be Friday tomorrow because we felt it, obviously, with the last night's game that we needed to focus on that today on this show. So that's why we delayed it a day. And we'll have a brief segment at the end of Five Rings tomorrow to talk about the Seattle-Houston game as well. Look, the only way that Houston wins this game is if they get an early goal. I think that's pretty obvious. Seattle's pretty comfortable. They're highly unlikely to allow 3. They're highly unlikely to allow 1, the way that they've been playing defensively. And we're going to have a week to talk about that rematch. And Seattle's going to be confident. They've done it before. They know how to win on the road in the playoffs. They've won an MLS Cup at BMO Field. So they will certainly be believing in themselves heading into that game. But this TFC team, 1 win away.
Yeah.
All those years, all those dark days, it's kind of surreal in many ways. And I'm not too sure whether this has completely clicked into me yet that they're going back to back. As I said, last year was pure exhilaration. This year is, it's a quiet confidence. And I think even the fans were celebrating at the end last night, but there was a little bit of restraint because I think that one more win thing is in the back of everyone's minds.
I don't want to be pedantic, but we talked a lot about the treble. But technically, it's actually false. Because technically, if Toronto wins the MLS Cup, they've won the Quattro.
Well, yes, because you've got the Eastern Conference Trophy as well. Sure, why not? Trophy Cup, you go 5 too if you want to include that.
Oh yeah, exactly. So Cinco. How do you say 5? I don't know.
No.
The Cinco de Mayo. That's something different. But anyways, 5 trophies. That's a lot.
Cinco is how you say 5. Yes.
I know, but I was trying to find a way to make a nice little like Cinco something, and no, it didn't come to me.
Cinco Campione. I think that's right. Anyway, yeah. Look, good. I'm looking at this in the background. I have the highlights of the game up, and it's weird. Like I say, I'm almost detached from it a little bit. Like I watched those Montreal highlights like 7 times the next day. Last year it was just such a rush. That was like, squeaky bum time doesn't do it justice in those stands for the last 30 minutes. TFC changed the shape a little bit down the stretch, and we're looking to defend, and that
we didn't even talk about this. The adjustments by Vanny at halftime. He literally changed the shape of his team, took Zavaleta out, put in who was it? Who was training in the Delgado? Delgado comes in for Zavaleta, and you have a totally different TFC. The one thing in the first, we're going to get technical here in the finish of the show, but in the first half, Michael Bradley was getting out-dueled on balls. He was getting players behind him and then wasn't able to perform his duty as a defensive midfielder because of the way the shape of Columbus was. And Vanny was able to give the right corrections at halftime, the right adjustments to stop that move from Columbus that were able to put players behind Toronto's defensive midfield.
Yeah, look, I think the better team won just. You know what I mean? Like, I think Toronto was, over the 2 games, just a little bit better. And it wasn't a dominant performance like we saw earlier in the year, but Columbus is a very good team. I legitimately think they might be the second best team in the league. So, and that's with all due respect to anyone in the West, obviously. And
or to Atlanta.
Also not saying that the Western team can't win the MLS Cup final. They clearly can. But in terms of just pure talent, I would pick Columbus over any team in the Western Conference. Last thought I have on this, and Again, we'll cover the game tomorrow after 5 rings. But the last thought I have on the TFC game is, look, in the end, it was the stars that made the difference. You look at that goal, Vasquez, Javinko, Altidore, all involved in that, and Bono, who's having a great stretch run right now with the long ball in to set it all up to start the playoff. It was a brilliant team goal, and the top end talent TFC has is their game breaker. It's their difference maker, and once again, it got the job done last night. And
the difference makers made the difference.
Yeah, I mean, look, that tackle. Like, I can't.
That's why I tackled that back check. Let's use the back check, right? He never stopped running, came back, slid, and got the ball, Michael Bradley.
Yeah, look, they should have scored there. Like, they absolutely should have scored there. And the touch wasn't great. If you're a Columbus fan, that's probably what you're focused on. But still, to make that close that quickly from where he was is insane. And anyone that I don't want to get into this too much, but the U.S. fans that are booing him and accusing him of "quote unquote" sleepwalking through the qualifiers. I know you're frustrated, but you're talking out your ass. He's not sleepwalking. He just was misused in those games. And you watch him play that game yesterday, and you can't say that man doesn't put a full effort in every game.
He's only one of 11.
He was 5 years ago. No, but he's still damn good, and he is an absolute warrior right there for sure.
When he plays for the U.S. men's national team, it's the same as in Toronto. He's only one of those 11 players, so you can't blame him for everything, right? Yeah. And sometimes we imagine, he should have more influence on his teammate. He should have more influence in the game. Yeah, but sometimes games don't go like you plan, and sometimes the whole schematics you have in your mind, the plan of how the game is going to pan out, it doesn't. And you imagine, he's going to be there, the ball's going to be, and then never gets the ball, and whatever you wanted him to do, he can't because it's not going down the way you imagine it. Sometimes it's, it's a game, it's a sport. Sometimes you have to react and not always plan and adjust. Sometimes you just have to do what you need to do in the heat of the moment. So whatever.
Yeah, precisely. So
all right.
The Stars won the game. TFC fans, check your inbox. The ticket details are out already. So you're gonna have to Sunday to buy them if you're a season ticket holder, and then they go on sale to the public next Tuesday. And on that note, Kevin, I'm gonna say goodbye, and I'm going to maybe watch the highlights one more time.
just to make sure that the result hasn't changed since yesterday. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute, and myself at Kev Laramee tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern, 5 rings. With a little portion of soccer today, but we're going to start our road to Pyeongchang once again tomorrow. And until then, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.